Hey, it's the good folks at Comics for Fun and Profit reminding you that nobody Patreons like we Patreon. So join us at C4FAP and go over to Patreon/Comics Fun Profit and sign up at a level of your choosing. There's various tiers with various goodies for you. Something that everyone gets at any level is you get to be a part of our Slack channel community, and you get early and ad-free access to all our episodes. But wait, there's more. So go over to Patreon/Comics Fun Profit and check out all we have to offer. We urge you, sign up today.
Aloha, this is Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing writer Samuel Sattin. He is here to promote his Kickstarter, Unico Awakening. Now, this is a 172-page manga. This is an international Kickstarter campaign that is currently underway. The campaign ends on June 2nd. It already has reached its goal in the first 24 hours. Samuel, two questions. First off, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, a little tired, but I'm doing well. It's been a long but wonderful week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Because that's right. Because the Kickstarter started on Monday, this past
it
Monday.
did. Yeah, Monday bright and early, 9 a.m. PST, and it's been. I mean, and again, incredibly grateful, and I mean, it's incredibly exciting. But it's just been a lot of it's been a lot of work this past week and a lot of momentum.
Mm-hmm. And then second, I forgot. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you this before we started the interview. Did I pronounce the Kickstarter's title correctly?
You did Unico Awakening. Yes, absolutely. That was perfect.
All right. Now, listeners, I'm just going to go over Samuel's work history, his comics, and he's written a couple books. And Samuel, again, please feel free to add anything, correct me. If you want to talk about stuff, that's fine too. Okay.
Cool.
So I'm going to start off. You wrote a book back in 2013 from Dark Coast Press, The League of Somebodies. Is that correct?
That is correct. It was my first prose book. It was completely all words.
Mhm.
And yeah, definitely my first book in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. I want to, sorry, off the cuff, I want to add something because when I was doing some little bit of the research, because I think I was trying to do some, part of my research is like to listen to previous interviews that creators, like if you've done, done interviews in the past. I came across your channel and it had the League of Somebody's trailer. That was funny. It was funny. It's like, yeah, Samuel writing a book. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I made that myself with the help of some friends, and it was the first thing that I ever tried to do. My first guerrilla marketing campaign, I guess you would call it. And yeah, it was kind of like the fact that people were supposed to be really surprised that I was actually writing a book at all, and that was the joke of it. Yeah, that was the first thing I've ever done like that.
Uh-huh.
Quite a while back.
But so, listeners, if you guys get a chance, check out that 2-minute trailer of the promoting of the League of Somebodies. It's funny. It is hilarious. I'm all right. I'm sorry, Samuel. So I'm
No
going to
problem.
continue. I'm going to continue on, and then also I know you wrote some like graphic novels and comics as well. One of the comics that you wrote was Legend from the publisher Z2 that came out in 2016. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So that was my first published comic. Came out with from Z2 Comics in 2016. That was Legend, and it was kind of we used to pitch it as The Walking Dead meets Watership Down.
Oh
Is
my
kind of
God.
the way that it used to go, and
Uh-huh.
it's still unfinished as of today, but half the series has been completed, and
Mhm.
that's still, from what I understand, it's still available. But that was my first comic, yeah. And then from there on, I went to work on a lot of more comic projects,
Mhm.
and the rest is
Okay.
pieces here, yeah.
And then your next comic project, one of your other comics project, and I'm going to try to pronounce the title correctly.
Hmm,
Bez Camp
that's right.
from Oni Press that came out in 2019.
hmm
And then I also saw that you also wrote something called Adventure Quest. Is that a comic or prose novel?
So yeah, Best Camp came out from Oni Comics, the Oni Line Forge in 2019. It's with a person I still collaborate with, who whose work I really love, named Rye Hickman,
Mm-hmm.
and they and me we're working on a book called Buzzing that's going to be coming out next year from Little Brown from Young Readers, which is kind of neat. It's the same collaborative team, and it
Mm-hmm.
was a kind of a dystopian sci-fi story about a place where language had been changed because books had been banned for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Best Camp is about. And then Adventure Quest was actually a serialized novel that I pioneered, that I kind of started to put out in tapas
Mm-hmm.
when they were tapastic.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was with some sections illustrated by another friend of mine, actually, whose print appears in Unico Awakening, Katie Longeway.
Oh,
And so it's like, so she did some of the illustrations for Adventure Quest, and that one is it's about a young woman who is inside a simulation to combat a form of depression, and it's kind of a fantasy world simulation in order to kind of like combat this
mm-hmm.
this inner turmoil. Yeah, so that's those two.
Okay. And then also too, that you in 2020, it came out in 2020, you adapted the Academy Award nominated cartoon Wolfwalkers, and that came out from the publisher Little Brown. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, Little Brown for Young Readers. So yeah, that's based off of the film Wolfwalkers, created by Cartoon Saloon,
Mm-hmm.
and made by the creators Tom Moore and and also the other. It's Tom Moore and why have I forgotten his name? It's right on the tip of my tongue. It should be on the front of the book somewhere.
No, yeah.
Yeah, I was able to adapt that to graphic novel format, and that was an incredible experience. And I'm still working on some things with those folks at the moment too. So in the future, you'll likely hear more about that. But yeah, that was a really neat experience adapting such a gorgeous film to graphic novel format.
Okay. And then your next, no, correct me if I'm wrong. You also, now this just came out recently in April of this year. Crunchyroll Essential Animated Fan Favorite Memorable Masterpieces and Cult Classics. And it came and this is a prose novel, correct? From Running Press?
Yeah, this is a nonfiction cultural criticism novel. It's basically the history of anime and 50 different anime that you should watch. I co-wrote it with my colleague Patrick Macias,
Mm-hmm.
and he knows a lot of tons and tons about the history of anime, and we worked on it together. And right now, it's going to. I think it got delayed a little bit because it has to have some things worked out in it, but it's coming out soon.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, it's very cool. We're very proud of it. We get to kind of basically got to kind of geek out about old anime for for a bunch of pages, and we got some really great contributors on board as well from to help us out. People like Deb Aoki contributed an essay. We had some other fresh voices as well that really came in and helped. And so yeah, hopefully you'll be able to see that soon.
Okay. This is off the cuff question, and I am joking when I'm asking this question. When you guys when you guys had a contract with Running Press, did you guys put in there, hey, we need to go to Japan, for at least a week or two. We need to be immersed in the anime culture.
I wish. That would be the dream. Well, actually, Patrick lives in Tokyo, so Patrick actually lives in Tokyo, and I was actually in Japan over all of April.
Yeah.
To work on the Unico Awakening campaign. So I got there anyway. Yeah. So I got to be immersed.
All right. And then you have a book coming out, and it's coming out, I believe, in 2024 from the imprint Macmillan Publishing. Side Quest: A Visual History of Role-Playing Games, and it's with artist Steins.
Steins.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that one is one of somebody joked, a friend of mine joked that like basically I'm earning my nerd bones, which is like, we have the anime on one end, and then I'm also working with tabletop role playing games. And yeah, I'm a long time player of tabletop role playing games, and so a while back I decided I wanted to try to pitch a book of nonfiction book about a graphic novel about the history of role playing games, and I started working with my colleague Steens on it, and we put together a pitch, and we finished the book. And actually, the book now is being edited; it's all penciled out, but it's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, because I've never played role playing games. I've always been tempted, but I don't have the attention span, But I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be interested to read this book because I want to see the history of how it evolved. And
yeah,
yeah,
a lot of see, the thing is about it, it's actually really, for me, I think that's actually, I mean, you don't have to play them to be interested in what they are. It's like, and actually I understand that because I'm a little bit more like that with video games, to be honest. Like, I don't have the ability to spend too much time on a game, but I like watching them.
Yeah.
I like watching them be played, and I'm interested in them, but I wouldn't consider myself like a hardcore gamer, right? So yeah, I think that's totally like a legitimate way to look at something like that. Like, yeah, this is interesting. I want to play it, but I find it interesting.
Yeah. So, did I miss anything?
No, that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
And then I'm going to ask: do you want to promote anything right now before I move on, or anything?
Oh well, I mean, if we're promoting, I will say please support Unico Awakening on Kickstarter. Please continue to pledge for exclusive, amazing awards from amazing artists, and help us continue to grow this project. That's what I would say for promotion, because that's all that's in the forefront of my mind right now. It's Unico Awakening.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, before I start getting into the interview, I want to give a big shout out to Hannah Bahedri of Superfan Promotions. Hannah, thank you very much. Thank you for asking Comics for Fun and Profit to interview Samuel, and thank you for setting up this interview. Again, Hannah, thank you very much. Samuel, I'm going to ask, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I would like to, I'll endorse that. I'll say thanks to, like, Hannah's awesome, and so is David Hyde, and all Superfan Promotions, and shout out to all those amazing people over there, because they're the best.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, too, I just want to let listeners know, I got, my information from Samuel website, Sattin.com. Also, of course, from Wikipedia. And also, too, I also want to point out that I also got some information from the Comics Beat article, interview with Samuel. Sattin talks Unico Awakening. That article came out on May 5th, 2022. Now, Samuel, where can listeners follow you on social media?
You can follow me at Samuel Sattin, SamuelSattin, on Twitter, and the same for Instagram as well. I think that's pretty much the most places you're going to find me. But also, please reach out via the contact form on my website as well if you'd like to get in touch with me directly.
Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to ask just a little bit of your origin story. Where did you grow up?
I grew up outside of Denver, Colorado. So in a place called, well, first it was called Aurora, and then it became Centennial. But basically south of, I guess to say south, a little south of Denver, about 15 minutes. And when this is before Denver was was what it is today, which is like super, which is like we're legal marijuana and stuff like that. It's a little different back in the early 80s, where it was kind of a little more of a cowboy town. So I grew up there. And then I my family is all from the East Coast. They're all from Massachusetts and New York.
Okay, all right. And then what was or were your first comics or Sunday comics that you read?
Honestly, my first comics, what really got me excited about comics when I was young is I remember I went to a Renaissance festival when I was maybe
Mhm.
10,
Yeah.
and I picked up a bunch of issues of ElfQuest.
Oh.
And this was when they were still self-publishing too, so that it's kind of the big kind of
Yeah.
larger volume, the larger issues.
Mhm.
And fell in love with the comics.
Mhm.
And then I also was reading Bone at the time.
Mhm.
And then and then probably what solidified me like to get into like real like to go to the comic shops and get into comics was probably actually the Image revival of the 90s,
Yes.
where where you had like the Max and Spawn and
Yeah.
Youngblood and all that different stuff. So I was collecting all of those, and also X-Men, I was super into X-Men and Superman and Batman, so I got really
Yeah.
into superhero comics,
Mhm.
and that was kind of the way that I imprinted on them. That's what, but then like also like yeah, that's how I got into comics initially.
Mhm. And then let's see. Drew, Comics for Fun and Profit, co-host submitted this question.
Hmm.
Um, because like you mentioned that you started to pick up Spawn, X-Men. What was your first comic shop that you went to buy these?
Mile High Comics in Mile High Comics, and I think it was in Aurora, Colorado.
That
So
makes
that's where I
sense.
used to go. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh
Mile
my.
High Comics.
So was that I'm just asking because was it the main store or did they have like small, like was there a
So at the time, it was a much smaller store. Oh, that's right. It's really big now, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah,
that.
it's really big now. That's right. So when I was going there, it was not. It was a small little place in the strip mall, right? It was a
Oh.
tiny little place, and so that's like I remember seeing them at a recent convention.
Uh-huh.
They had this huge table at the convention and stuff like that, and then I was like looking at. I went online and looked at the store. I'm like, oh my god, it's huge.
Yeah.
No, when I was younger, it was a tiny little, tiny little shop. And so I don't know when they expanded, but that
Mhm.
wasn't that was not my time. It was a lot earlier.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just impressed because just because I remember sorry, I'm kind of going off the track, but I
No,
remember
please.
um when I was reading comics in the late 70s, early 80s, I remember seeing Mile High Comics and Mile High Comics ad in Marvel Comics going, hey, you can buy this X-Men comics, these old issues for $2, $3,
Right.
and I ordered some back issues from them.
We used to go thumb through their boxes because they would have their rack at the front with all the new comics, and then they would have their boxes and boxes and boxes in the back off to the side, and we go and thumb through them and find things that we wanted. Um, yeah, but they were definitely a collector spot back then too, but they were just smaller. I think they just
Yeah.
got bigger and bigger and bigger as
Yeah.
time went on.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I'm off the cuff question. Did you like spend like at least an hour in that store trying to look for back issue
Oh
stuff?
yeah, we were all there. That was we spent so much time at the comic shop
Mhm.
at LA Comics. We would just go by and just like, we would search for we'd search for back issues, and we'd buy like things that were kind of like signed or weird. And also they had like some and again, this was during the first Image boom,
Yes.
right? So it's like you had like all of these kind of new superhero comics. So
Yes.
everybody's obsession, at least in my age group, was Spawn and getting all
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
Spawn, the rare Spawns, and making sure you had number 1 and number 4, and
Yes.
and then that was a big thing. This is the first appearance of Violator, and
Uh-huh.
and so you wanted all these different things, and then I got really into Wolverine too at one point. So I started getting all these searching their back bins for all these different old Wolverine comics,
Yes.
and yeah, I would just we spend a lot of time in my comics growing up. Yep, it was there in a place called Tactics, which was a gaming shop. So
Mhm.
there were 2 places we used to basically spend time in, and that was one of the two.
Um, Now I'm gonna ask you, since the focus is gonna be on the Unico Kickstarter, do you remember your first manga that you read?
My first manga that I read was likely. So the thing is, at first I was actually, because growing up in Colorado, we ended up having access to some anime that we
Oh,
would go and we get a lot of. So I would go to Suncoast Video in the mall, and
yes, yeah.
or I would go to there were some things in the Blockbuster and stuff like that, and you go get some films. So that was my first. I was actually first introduced via to anything that was Japan
Yes.
based through anime.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started reading more actual manga probably in college, actually, when I first got to college. And so I would think that my first one was probably my first full big read of Akira. Was the first big read. And then I started, and then from there it's all big blur. I can't remember. Yeah, I'm trying to think about because I didn't start young with manga, because now it's actually interesting. You see now, I'm actually kind of almost jealous in a way, because there's so many, there's so much available now.
Yes.
But when I was growing up, there really wasn't anything around. It was hard to get manga.
Yeah.
And so anime was a little bit easier, but it was still hard.
Yeah.
and then but getting the actual books was not an easy feat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's right, because when you mentioned Suncoast Videos, that's right, because our Suncoast, and because since I live in Hawaii, I kept thinking our Suncoast had a small little section, a manga section, and I just thought it was just I just automatically assumed it's, we're in Hawaii, but
right.
That's pretty smart of Suncoast to do an anime section up on the mainland, and then it's also smart of them to do, at least bring out some manga books that would probably be that would interest the mainland audience. I don't know, maybe like Gundam or something.
Sure. Yeah, and also they had I think that when you're it's kind of a when you're in Hawaii, or you're in the Bay Area, for example, where I live now. That's where I live. I live in Oakland, California. But now you can see how if you grew up in the Bay Area, or you grew up in Hawaii, you might have more access to manga, right?
That's right.
But I mean, in Colorado, the fact that we had any anime at all was kind of a small miracle, right? So we got obsessed. We became absolutely obsessed with it. But it was I don't think it was harder. The only ways that I would really find manga was if they would be printed by Dark Horse.
Yes.
They would have things you could go and you could get some. They would actually sometimes they would print them in floppy issue format.
Yes.
And so we get that. I'd be so cool.
Yeah.
But that was all we really had access to.
Yes.
So basically at one point when I got to college, I found access to more of it. So I just started reading everything I possibly could. So just that was kind of the way that I did it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, and then, sorry, I'm going to continue on, because we're going to circle around back to the manga and all their genres. It's incredible, their genres. But anyway, so how did your journey started in writing prose novels and working in comics?
So I guess the thing is about me is that I'm a little odd in that I really do. I mean, I guess it's not odd. I guess it just sounds a little bit vague when I say I read everything. I like to read everything. There's nothing that I don't there's no genre that I don't think is interesting, and there's definitely no medium that I don't think is interesting. So I grew up reading books. I grew up just a huge reader of. I read mostly fantasy books growing up. I was a huge fantasy book reader, but I just became and then I got into sci-fi and stuff like that. But then when I got into comics, I just I knew also. They also had a huge impact on me. And what ended up happening was when I started to really decide that I wanted to start trying to become a writer, I knew that I wanted to work in both. I loved books, but I thought that comics were almost more interesting than books. In which there's I always say if I have a percentile, if I have if there's a percentile pie graph for how much of me loves comics and how much of me loves books, it's probably 51% comics.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit more because I think they're just so fascinating the way, and they can do so many incredible things with narrative. So that's like basically I started writing prose, but I knew that I wanted to get into comics, and I started to stake out some things in my life that brought me there. And also my first book, even though it was kind of an experimental book and kind of all over the place, it tied into comics. So
Yeah.
League of Somebodies was all about superheroes and stuff like that. And so I really wanted to go in the direction of like working in that medium.
That's so cool. That is so cool. Now I'm going to start talking to you about Unico
Sure.
Awakening Kickstart. Now, before I start, sorry listeners, you're going to have to hear me kind of talk about, just to give a little brief definition what a manga is for some new listeners. And Samuel, please correct me anytime or just add something.
Sure.
So, I just want to let listeners know that manga is for me, it's kind of a blind spot in my reading habits. And I'll be honest with you, I'll be honest, I've never heard of Unico. I've never heard of this series. And again, I'm going to touch upon a little bit of how wide a genre of mangas there is, the genres they cover. So I'm going to be learning from Samuel about this character. Please forgive me. My pronunciation of Japanese names and words will be off, so please forgive me on that. Even though, I'm Asian, half Japanese, I still mispronounce Japanese words. So now, for someone who's new to manga, these are Japanese comics or graphic novels that are, most of them are digest size and are read from right to left. Most of them are in black and white, and the genre ranges. I mean, I have to whittle it down, but some of them range from action, adventure, of course, fantasies, romance, horror. And this is going to be the fascinating part, business and commerce. And I can vouch for that, because when I took a Japanese history course in college, one of our reading requirements was some type of manga book, just to talk about, the business side and everything. And I was I couldn't believe that I was reading a manga book for a college course.
Oh yeah.
And I know there were at least a couple of I know back in the 80s, they manga was slowly introduced in a comic book format, as Samuel mentioned, by the Dark Horse did do this in the 90s. I know, like I said, back in the 80s, I know they did Blade of the Immortal, Mai the Psy Girl from Eclipse Comics, and of course, Lone Wolf and Cub by Dark Horse.
Yeah, that was one of the first. Lone Wolf and Cub, I think, was the first like real Dark Horse dig into manga, and which I didn't actually even figure out until a little bit later on, like when I was in college and stuff like that. But yeah, and no, it's the things that you're talking about. It's really interesting to talk about for me, because like so as far as I look at it, like manga is just comics. It's Japanese comics, right? So it's like manga is basically another word for comics, but because of the fact that we see them, and so because they do have such a distinct kind of cultural imprint, and they do come from a different country, and they in a different culture, and they do have their kind of own system, they do end up having a real different they stand out in a different way, right? And I completely agree that in manga you can find any genre you can think of. It exists. If you want sports manga, if you want cooking manga, if you want manga about starting a business, if you want manga about whether, and there's all kinds of different kinds of romance and erotica, and then all of a sudden, and anything you could think of. It actually, when I was in Japan to work on the Unico Awakening project, I was actually kind of blown away again, because I'd seen this before, but I got a little bit more time to dig in this time. Just the sheer size and scale of comic books in Japan. Like you have like full, like you'd be like, here, like, you have a comic book shop, and if you have a store, you have a section, small section, that is kind of focused on comics.
Mm-hmm.
But in Japan, you'd be like, oh, you want to go look at manga, go to floor 3.
Yeah.
It's this huge, like huge, massive like store filled with books, and like then if you want to get one genre, the genre can stretch on for shelves and shelves and shelves, and so it's like there's a lot that's available, which I think is something that's very unique to manga and the way that they've set up the system there.
Yes, and Sammy, I'm going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, because if I remember correctly, manga is not specified to one age group. Basically, pretty much
Everything.
Kids to businessmen are reading.
Oh yeah, no, that's one of the things I think that I think it's hard. I've talked about this with quite a few people, both here and also in Europe and in Japan. I think this is a very it's kind of the state of the history of American comics is a little tragic, because you have like the idea that in this country, there's a reason why you can't find a lot of early books from people are like, well, where are the original pages from all these early comics? It's like, oh well, they were trashed, right? Because they were looked at as kind of like kids crap, like in a negative way. And in Japan, like in certain places in Europe, right, comics are just looked at with more respect. And so you see like not only are they for everybody, but it's not weird to be reading comics on the subway on the way to work.
Yes.
And so it's like comics are just a part of life. They're everywhere. You go to every single every single convenience store, every single you'll see like they have a full section of comics on the shelf, and it's like so it's just more commonplace, I think. So that's why so you have them for very little kids, you have them for young girls, you have them for young boys, you have them for teenage girls and teenage boys, you have them for adults, you have them for anything you can think of, and then you have the sections of the genre sections, which split off in a lot of different directions depending on what you're looking for. And yeah, I mean, but there's something for someone, some category that you can fall into if you feel comfortable doing that.
Off the cuff question, and I'm kind of joking, and I'm joking on this part. When you did you go to that third floor of the store to see the manga section?
Oh yeah, every third floor and every basement and every fourth floor, and I spent a lot of time in bookstores when I was there.
So was your mind blown when you just thought, oh my God, look at all this, It
really was. It actually, my mind was blown, and then I got, to be honest with you, hopefully this isn't too much of a bummer, I got a little sad because I wish we had something a little bit more closer to that here with books, because as a person who, like, I love books of all kinds, like it's what I love, just like, make me happy. So it's like, the stores there, the bookstores, they're just fantastic. And like, they're filled with like all these different surprises, and they have all the displays are really like well oriented to shine the right kind of light on certain books and stuff like that. And it's like, it's very much like and there are a lot of people in these stores that are walking around and looking at all these books and buying books. And I mean, some places are absolutely mobbed. Like, you cannot even walk around. It's too much. Like, you walk around, like, okay, I'm being assaulted by humans. I need to leave.
Yeah.
It's like, but yeah, so it's incredible. And it kind of made me a little bit wistful, saying, I wish we could just take a little bit of this and have a little bit of this here, because it'd be nice to be able to go to stores where they're just teeming with books everywhere, that people are always inside them. Like that's really, to me.
Oh, that would be really nice.
Yeah, it is wonderful to see though. If you like comics, it's really, everybody should go see, the comic shops or just the bookstores in Japan.
Oh God, no, because my mind would be blown too.
Yes.
And I'll be stuck there for an hour or two.
Oh, I've spent many. Yes. Yes, full days.
Okay, so this is kind of the perfect segue to it going into the Unico Kickstarter. So I'm going to ask, um, who is Unico?
So Unico is, that's a great question, actually. So Unico, well, Unico is created by Osamu Tezuka,
Mm-hmm.
who's considered to be the god of manga in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
the father of manga, like basically the person who created modern, who paved the way for modern manga and modern anime in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically single-handedly started the anime industry. So like, and for people in the U.S., they usually associate him with Astro Boy,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Adam Tetsuo Adam, and so it's like people know more about that character, but Tezuka's output was absurd in its how prolific it was. And Unico was a character that was created particularly in coordination with Sanrio back in the day. It came out in 1974,
Mm-hmm.
originally in comics. In comics format, was serialized then for 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
from 1974 to 1976. And the character himself is a character that it's a young unicorn, a young male unicorn
Mm-hmm.
who uh, whose gift, I guess you could say,
Mm-hmm.
is the ability to inspire beauty and kindness
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
and love wherever he goes.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, the gods, and one goddess in particular, the goddess of love and beauty,
Mm-hmm.
Venus,
Mm-hmm.
becomes envious and enraged by Unico's existence.
Mm-hmm.
So she wants him to be essentially destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So she asks one of her servants to take him across space and time
Mm-hmm.
until he forgets everything he was, and wipe his memory completely and leave him in this place called, I think, the Hill of Oblivion, I believe, or the Hall of Oblivion,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
just to wander in solitude forever.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a pretty rotten, horrible thing to do. And then the Venus's servant, the West Wind,
Mm-hmm.
takes pity on Unico and spares him from this eternity on the Hill of Oblivion,
Mm-hmm.
and instead uh, deposits him in different places and kind of like hides him from the gods,
Mm-hmm.
as she takes him from era to era throughout time.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever he must leave an era, she has to wipe his memory,
Oh, okay.
because in order to protect him, because whenever he makes friendships and whenever he helps people, his power grows, and the gods become aware
Yes. Mm-hmm.
of his existence. So then the West Wind has to come and get him again, take his memory away, and put him somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so this horrible cycle of just like trying to bring him from place to place to place, and he never remembers his past deeds.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of I would say that as a character, he is a character who, in my mind, represents perseverance, kindness, and to a certain extent, tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. How did you hear about this character?
So I've been I really got into Tezuka's work probably a good decade and a half ago, where I really started to really just one book in particular, and that I read, called MW. They call it Mu in Japan. Really left a mark on me. It was probably one of his darkest books, but I started to really. I think it's just a really incredible work, and as far as the cartooning goes in it, it's just I think you can learn a lot from that book as a cartoonist, just reading that book, and I think he just shows off all his stuff in that book. It's just really incredible. So I was a big kind of Tezuka fan, so I started to kind of read all these different, everything I could get my hands on.
Yeah.
And one of those characters was Unico. And I remember thinking when I first read it that one of the most amazing things about the character in particular is that it's a character that, I'm just going to turn this off.
Okay.
It's a character that, though he is this cute little unicorn,
yes.
it's a very powerful and kind of like it's very much not My Little Pony in terms of the way that the themes that are. And this is not saying anything bad about My Little Pony. It's more just saying that it's very much like the association one would have with looking at this character and then reading the story. You might have a little bit of whiplash in reading it because it is such a powerful and tragic and beautiful story, and that kind of and that I remember when I read that for the first time, I found that it was really quite powerful. And I'd also seen some of the animation that I think a lot of 80s kids saw, which were these two movies which people have talked about in the tradition of a lot of mid 70s and early 80s movies for kids, traumatized them. So just like it was very traumatizing. It is a very difficult story, and I would say I'll call it a complex story. Yeah. And so yeah, that's when I probably first heard about it, was the animation when I was younger, and then I started to really kind of get into it when I started to become more interested in Tezuka himself and his work.
No, and also I'm going to say the two movies that you referred to, I want to say, I think one of them was The Fantastic Adventures of Unico.
That's right.
And Unico in the Island of Magic, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and they're both phenomenally good, both phenomenally interesting movies. The second one in particular, a lot of people have called horror for kids. So, a little bit of nightmare fuel. It's a wonderful film, but it's just, there's some parts in it that will surprise you.
Yeah,
I think for being, again, for having this this little sweet unicorn as the main character, and then you get in, you're like, oh, this is a little bit more. It's a little bit more to chew on than I thought.
Yeah. I'm going to say I understand. No, I do. Because I'm just trying to think, because I've probably seen some of these, not the Unico cartoons, but I'm sure I've seen some Japanese animation. Well, oh, okay, we're going a little dark here, but PG,
Well, even there's I was actually talking to one of the guest artists on one of the community artists for the campaign, Joko Mizuno. We were talking about this, and we're talking about how in the mid 70s and early 80s, in particular, early mid 80s, you had a lot of these films that would come out, and sometimes they would be in collaboration with Japanese studios, like you have like The Last Unicorn, which was in a collaboration with the Japanese studio, Little Nemo the Dream Master.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or Little Nemo Slumberland, was that what it's called?
Something
like that. That was in collaboration with the Japanese studio. And then there were films that were just that were kind of a little bit in that category, like The Never-Ending Story or Dark Crystal, or you can think about The Secret of Nim as being in that category, and films that are animated or for kids, but they have these very complex and heavy themes that you might remember from that period and watch them again and be like, oh my god, I watched this when I was 6. It's like, oh my god. So it's like, and Unico definitely falls into that category of film. Like it's one of those movies you watch them and you're like, wow, I can't believe that I saw this as a young child.
But I'm just saying, but and like I said, correct me if I'm wrong, and this is off the cuff observations, that it sounded like some of these Japanese creators, and even when they did the animation, is that they added a little bit more sophistication to their story, that they didn't dumb it down to kids. They kind of figured, because not only kids are going to be watching this, but some adults too, and
Well, I think that's a measure of, like, we see, this is actually why I think that Tezuka himself is so interesting, and like what he did with stories. So, you see, like in America, we have the tradition of like the Disneyfication, the happy ending stories. So you take these fables that were actually pretty grim when they began, right? When they, like, the story of Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, all these stories are actually fairly grim in certain ways. and then Disney kind of turns them into these kind of happy ending stories where things
Yes.
turn out okay and everybody's happy.
Mhm.
And that's a very American thing to do, the happy
Yeah.
ending, right? As opposed to, I think that when you look at a lot of Japanese films and a lot of Japanese animation, they're far more comfortable with the idea of complexity and
Yes.
so Tezuka himself, for example, if you look at one of his most famous creations worldwide, Tetsuo and Atom, Astro Boy,
Mhm.
You see essentially the story of Pinocchio. You see this boy that was built by somebody who's some sort of engineer, right? Who creates this artificial boy who will never be a real, who wants to be a real boy. That's Astro Boy. But in Astro Boy, as opposed to in the Disney version of Pinocchio, Astro Boy, when his creator, who created him to replace his dead son, who got killed in a car accident, when he creates him and he realizes he will not grow into a real boy, he sells him into servitude. and he just essentially turns into this maniacal, obsessed, narcissistic man, and does the most horrible thing one can do to someone, which is essentially banish them from your life and again sell them. I think he sells them to the circus. And it's so it's and then eventually he's found by someone who's more by a more kind of generous person who helps him and and brings him to the next it allows him to become the hero that he becomes. But the story is far more, I think, when you look at Tezuka's work, he seems to be a lot more he really did look at humans and think that humans are complex and human beings can be tough, they can be awful sometimes, and we shouldn't shy away from that, because kids are going to see that too. And I think that one thing that, and maybe it's changing here, I'm not quite sure, but I definitely think the classic thing in the United States is to hide, to cover your kid's eyes and be like, you shouldn't see that, don't look at that, which I think can lead to problems for kids later. And it's also why I think a lot of people grew up and they start to see manga and anime and stuff like that, and they started to get really into it because they're like, wow, these stories they don't talk down to me, they're complex, so yeah.
But that's a very good observation about manga, because I'm sorry, I'm kind of going off the cuff, but
sure, no, please.
Because the thing is, because we've been, because all of us have been hearing that manga in the United States have become very popular over the last few years.
That's right.
But like you said, that's a very good observation of, if kids and teenagers are going, wow, this is speaking to me.
That's right.
Because
the stories. I mean, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think a lot of stories that come out of Japan and they're very, I mean, I was talking, some people say they're such strange stories, such wild stories, such interesting stories. And I think that that's true. I think that one of the things is that, we in the United States, for good and for bad, we're far more, we like to streamline our stories a little bit more, they're a little bit easier to kind of digest. Where when you read, one of the common things I hear when people start first reading manga or first watching anime, and they're like, these stories are crazy. As they said, oh my God, these stories are wild. What is this? And I'm like, yeah, it's because they're pushing some boundaries, narratively, and they're not fitting into the same categories that we're fitting into here. And I think that does appeal to people. And then the complexity and the fact that when you are a teen and you're reading stuff, and you're looking at stuff, I think that we want to pretend sometimes, like people who are teenagers here and even, tweens and stuff like that, aren't reading and aren't looking at things that they're only going to watch things and read things that they're supposed to be for their age group.
Yes, yeah.
But that never happens. I saw Fist of the North Star when I was 14. And it's and I was watching people's heads explode on a screen, and that was the coolest thing in the world for me when I was 14. That's what but in a way I wanted to watch that.
Yeah,
because it was just one of those things that was just oh well, this is this is compelling in its own way. And I think that one of the issues is, yes, a lot of manga does not keep that boundary in place. I mean, there are of course some boundaries, but
Oh yeah. No,
you know,
yeah.
but it's like, you know, at the same time, like the idea of complex stories, complex world,
Yes.
bad things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's okay for kids to consume.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
yeah, and I think that's true. So, yeah,
No, but that's a very good, you know, that's a like I said, that's a very good observation because yeah. So so I'm going to jump to this one question.
sure,
I'm
sure,
jumping
sure.
ahead. So I know this is an international Kickstarter. So
Yes.
I'm going to ask you because because we talked about the popularity of manga, um you know Tetsuka, he was looking, when he created and wrote stories, they were complex.
Mhm.
You know, how popular is Unico around the world? Do you know by any chance? Because
Yeah, it's Unico around the world. I would say that it depends on where you go. In Japan, people will definitely know who Unico is. It's kind of whenever you go into one of those big bookstores I was talking about, or any bookstore that has comics in them, has manga. There's always a huge section devoted to Tezuka books, and so you have everything
Mhm,
there that you could possibly think of. And Unico is always there, and
mhm,
Unico just exists as a part of the landscape.
mhm.
Um, in the US, it's definitely more niche. You find
Okay.
people who, I think if you go around, you look around Twitter and see some of the reactions to this Kickstarter, you see there are a lot of people who just love the fact that this is actually happening,
Mhm.
because it's one of those characters that almost feels like, you know, there's a club that knows
Yeah,
about this
yes.
character, you know, and
Yeah.
it's mostly a bunch of people who were kids in the 80s who saw these films
Mhm,
and were, you know, and fell in love with them
mhm.
and fell in love with the character. And then from what I understand, in France and in parts of Europe, Tezuka work is a lot more known and appreciated and loved, like especially in France. And so in
Mhm,
France, they know more about Unico and stuff like that too.
mhm,
So I think it depends on where you are in the world.
mhm.
But I would say in the US, people have seen the character and they recognize it. They don't
Yeah,
necessarily know the story.
yeah.
And it's actually one of our hopes is that with this, we'll actually be with creating a new story for Unico. We also want to bring hopefully a nice new reprint of the original, so people can actually read it and people
Nice.
can actually get into it.
Yeah.
Because right now there's a digital copy that's available
Mhm.
that you can buy, but there's no, but the print editions have gone out of print. So we're really hoping to be able to use this as a catalyst to get it reprinted very professionally.
Off the cuff question.
Mhm.
Um, how, and I'm being serious,
Sure.
were you very surprised when you guys reached your goal literally in 24 hours and like around the world, not just like you said in the US, there's like a niche group here, but were you blown away by the response? I'm just trying to ask around the world.
Completely blown away by the response, and just really, really grateful
Yeah.
and happy to see, and relieved and happy. And you know, this is my first Kickstarter ever. I'd never done one before.
Hmm.
And so I was feeling, to be perfectly frank, pretty pretty on the verge of puking all day as we started. I was trying to figure out, like, you know, my stomach was roiling and I refused to look at the actual numbers because I didn't want to look at the actual page. I was too scared to look at it
Oh,
myself.
yes.
And so I just was concentrating on doing the things that I was supposed to do to get the word out,
Hmm.
with Superfan Promotions, we'll talk about earlier. And and then when we reached it, it was just this feeling of like, wow, if people believe in it like we believe in it. And so that was such a hugely lovely feeling for not just me, but definitely not just me, but for the rest of the people that are working on this. For Goody Hudu, who's the, you know, the co-creator of this
Hmm.
new series, for Tezuka Productions, who, you know, they were the
Hmm.
ones who helped us, and we've gone every single step of the way with, in terms of working on the story and working on this new
Hmm.
project. And so everybody was just so happy to see that this
Mhm.
story that everyone we believed in so much
Yes.
could reach so many people so quickly, and that people were felt like we did. And so that was just so wonderful to see.
That is pretty awesome. Um, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna circle around to regarding your creative team
Sure.
and working with Tezuka Productions. So because I want to make sure this is asked. What is the story about in for this Kickstarter? What is the story about?
Sure. So this story is about. It's based on actually the story from the original manga, the
Mm-hmm.
original book, called "The Cat and the Broomstick,"
Mm-hmm.
and that story is about. It's kind of it's a bit complex, so we'll get into the minor the granular points of it. Um, but it's essentially about Unico befriending a young cat,
Mm-hmm.
and a cat who ends up being kind of thrown out of her home, and the cat ends up wanting to become a human,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, to leave her felineness behind,
Mm-hmm.
and ends up together they end up forming a relationship with an older woman,
Mm-hmm.
and Unico ends up granting this cat the power to change into a human for a limited amount of time each day.
Oh, okay.
And then but he's afraid that the more that she does so, that she doesn't actually that becoming human actually might become um, more of a burden than not for her, and it might actually end up kind of hurting her in
Mm-hmm.
a way that she might not expect. And lo and behold, a character named Baron de Ghost, who is the this kind of sadistic hunter
Mm-hmm.
who lives on the edge of the forest they're in, ends up taking an interest in the human version of the cat,
Mm-hmm.
and ends up essentially, which almost leads to her demise. So it's like, and Unico has to help. And there's a lot of other aspects that come into it as well, but that's
Mm-hmm.
the basic gist of the story. And what we're doing with Unico Awakening is we're taking that story
Mm-hmm.
and we're building on it a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
um, using that main arc, but then we also have a larger arc going on in the background,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
where the West Wind, Unico's
Yes.
protector, takes on a much larger role as she tries to figure out how to break his cycle of forgetfulness, by
Mm-hmm.
traveling to the edge of time and space.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's kind of a larger story going on in the background that we're pushing.
Wow. I like I said. Oh my. Wow. um. I'm good. Um. I. I'm gonna ask. What drew you to do this, the reimagining or retelling of this story? What was that what was the yeah, because like you said, the original story was the cat on the broomstick. What drew you to for you guys to, you know, to do this for the Kickstarter? I hope you kind of get what I'm going at.
Sure, kind of like the reason why we kind of picked the reason why we picked the Unico in general, or just the reason why we picked the cat and the broomstick.
The cat and the broomstick, the story.
So okay, so yeah, I think that so there are a lot of really wonderful stories in the original books, but I did feel like the cat in the broomstick was the story that would serve as a really good modern introduction to the
Mm-hmm.
character and to the character's kind of situation,
Yeah.
and also it could build into a larger mythos of the in the Unico world.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of really wonderful, and also the themes that come out of that story. There's some really wonderful themes that Tezuka plays with in that story about, kind of the dangers of appearances, and kind of like leaving behind one's identity,
Mm-hmm.
and the destructiveness of envy, and all these different things that are really powerful themes that really draw me to that chapter.
Yes.
And so it's I think that in particular those are really heavily on display there, and I think that that's why it would make such a good introduction to the new Unico.
Samuel, I'm sorry, I'm not. It's just that is pretty deep. I mean, that's a great story to pick, and just what you were telling me is like, holy cow! I didn't realize it was that Tetsuko, when he wrote it, he made it really deep.
Yeah, he really did. So that's one of the things about Tezuka is like I think that and that's why sometimes it's harder to sometimes bring his stuff to the forefront. I think in a modern way because a lot of his stuff was really deeply emotional and had a lot of heavy themes in there and you know on display and you know I think that Unico in particular is so deserving of a modern retelling to bring to a new age of readers because I think it just has such incredible themes to be found inside and it's just an important story.
Mm-hmm. All right, sorry Simon, I'm going to continue on. So
no problem.
How did you team up with artist Gurihiru for this project?
Right. So Gurihiru was introduced to me after we kind of finalized the project. Gurihiru, that we're going to do the project, manga aficionado friend of mine, I mentioned her name earlier, Deb Aoki, introduced me to a person named, a friend of mine now, good friend of mine named Aki Inagi, who lives in Tokyo, and he basically represents Gurihiru and a bunch of other Japanese artists who are working cross nationally, who are working in the United States and in Japan both, and kind of doing a lot of different work. And we were discussing like, you know, that this project that we wanted to work on a new Unico, and we started looking at, you know, through kind of looking and talking about some of the artists that Aki represents, and we both kind of decided pretty quickly that Gurihiru would just be so perfect for this book. So then we had to go and see if they would felt the same way. So, you know, we were like, oh my God, Gurihiru would be perfect. And the reason I said this is because, I've said this before to a few different people, but I do feel like that Gurihiru's style is uniquely able to both appeal to both manga and American comics. It's really, really on that line. You can look at it and you can be like, wait, it's very much like Japanese comics. Wait, it's very much like American comics. And you really can't, it's like you can't like land on one side of the aisle, right?
Yes.
And it's very unique that way. I haven't seen anybody else who can do it quite like that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's like, it's basically, that was why I was like, and also their art's just, they're phenomenally talented. They're a pair from Saitama, Japan. They're two women from Saitama, Japan. They're incredibly talented. And yeah, they have that unique ability. So we went and talked to them about it. And we talked about it with them for a few months. It wasn't a you know, turnkey process. We talked to them. They wanted to think about it. We had to talk to them about the story, what it was going to be, and then finally, like, and I was completely, you know, floored to hear it. They said yes, and we started to work on the project together. And with, of course, Tezuka Productions. That was so Gurihiru and I, we started to put together, you know, a story. We started to work together with Gurihiru to get character designs. We got some editorial help from Deb Aoki. And then eventually we gave a story to Tezuka Productions and started to give them character designs and things like that and go forward.
I'm gonna ask,
it's been in the works for a while. It's been about over a year, for almost 2 years.
The other thing I'm gonna kind of ask one question I forgot to ask earlier. How did you come up with this Kickstarter campaign? Was it you that reached out to Tezuka Productions, or did they approach you? How did
that was wildly enough my idea. I wanted to. I was thinking about like what would be the best way to bring a new Unico to the world, and there were a lot of different ideas. Like, should we take it to a traditional publisher, which we probably could have, or I think that the reason that this ended up working so well is in the model of a Kickstarter is that we could bring together a lot of different artists to have them kind of almost like celebrate the character. And because I think that, you know, one of the things that we saw when we started talking to other artists about and started, propositioning them to work to do a print for Unico,
Mm-hmm.
everybody was incredibly excited about it. There was just incredible excitement. Like, really? You guys are
Mm-hmm.
you're doing this? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we would love to. Yeah, I'd love to contribute to print. And like Peach Momoko ended up saying, "Can I?" The reason we have 3, she was like, "Can I contribute 3? I want to draw more. Like, I love
Yeah.
Unico. I grew up with Unico. I love this character." And so that allowed it to be kind of like take on. I think that was we could only do this through a Kickstarter.
Yes.
Right? That
Mm-hmm.
was the only, yes, we could have put it through a more traditional process and done it that way, but that wouldn't have allowed us to get to have like this kind of real community kind of celebration of the character, which I think has been really cool to see.
And then let's see, because you have, and I'm just gonna name just a handful of people that's doing some prints for the Kickstarter.
Sure. Yeah.
Is Junko Mizuno.
Yep. Junko Mizuno.
Excuse me. Sue Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Academy Award nominated animator Tom Moore to do the prints. Now, how did you get them involved? Did you shout out an email? Was it word of mouth? One morning you wake up and it's like you got 25 emails from, "Hey, I want to do something."
So it was a real group effort. So on my side, I asked some artists like Katie Longeway, who I've known for a very long time, who I'm a big fan of her work. Junko Mizuno was a connect through a friend of mine who I ended up asking about. I would email everybody directly or contact them directly. And she ended up being really excited to do both a print and have the print be used also in kind of a t-shirt form. And then we, Sue Lee, and the same for Sue Lee and the same for Tom Moore, who I had met through working on the Wolfwalkers adaptation.
Yes.
And so I reached out to him and asked him about it. And he was gracious enough to say, "I would love to work on this." And then Aki, who works as who's Gurihiru's representative, ended up working with Gurihiru to actually ask certain artists. So Gurihiru was friends with, knows some of the other artists in that sphere, and so we reached out to all of them, and Aki reached out to some of them, and then they agreed to sign on as well. So it was kind of like but yeah, it was actually kind of shocking about how there was very little resistance. It was just like people were just like super excited to work on this character. They were just like, "I cannot wait. I would absolutely love to." And so we didn't have anybody who was like, everybody was like, "Yes, love to, absolutely." So it actually came together quite quickly in that regard.
That's so cool.
Which was really wonderful to see. It was so cool.
Yeah, that is so cool. I'm just going to go ask you a couple little technical questions, such as, because like I mentioned to, the listeners that, mangas are normally in black and white. This is going to be the dumb question. Is this going to be in black and white?
It will not. And actually, and speaking of Unico in particular, Unico is an interesting book because the original book was made in full color.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, so it was actually larger in format and it was full color, and it was actually the colors I believe were done by Sanrio. And so the original Unico is a full color book. And so that's why we're actually making this a full color book. And Gurihiru in particular is fantastic with color. And so it really honors that kind of vision and kind of really touches back upon, it homages that in a big way. So we're actually doing it very, very, very purposefully in full color.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, it's very different it kind of stands out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, if you want, I know this one, this is an audio medium, but here are the actual original Unico books. You can see. Oh
my God. Yes, I can see.
Yeah, they're all full color.
Wow, that is
And so they're also, as you can see, they're a little bit bigger than a manga. It's a little larger.
Yeah.
It's probably, it's probably more, what is the length on this is probably, it's about 10 inches by 7 inches. So it's a little bit bigger than your traditional manga, and it's getting, so they're really lovely. But yeah, so we're trying to kind of honor that vision by trying to kind of redo the books, to do the books in color.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Correct me if I'm wrong. Because when I saw the Kickstarter page, you're going to provide a Japanese language version and an English version, right?
Correct. Absolutely. Yes. We have we'll announce it soon. We have a really great translator on board that's done some really wonderful international translations for a lot of different books. We're going to do full Japanese translation, full English translation, and you can opt for it. At the end of the campaign, we will send a survey to ask people which one they want.
That is so cool. That is really nice.
Or you can add them as add-ons if you want to as well, if you want to do an additional one. But so we're doing both languages.
All right. So Samuel, I'm slowly wrapping the interview up. I'm going to say, if someone misses this campaign, I'm not being sarcastic, but let's say someone listens to this interview in July and go, oh, shoots, I want to, will it be available on those Kickstarter backer kits to buy the book?
Hey, so this is actually, so I'll be completely honest, my first Kickstarter, so I'm still learning a lot, but I believe so.
Okay.
Yes, we will figure out a way. We will figure out a way to make sure that Unico is available in the future to many people, and it's going to be thanks to the people who do help us realize this vision. So we'll figure out ways for anybody who wants to be able to get their hands on it.
Okay, all right. And then now, as I mentioned in the beginning, that the campaign is a huge success. Again, 24 hours, fully funded. Is there another Unico campaign on the drawing board right now?
I cannot speak to anything. I cannot. All I can say about all future plans right now is that I'm not allowed to speak about anything.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
I love to talk, but I cannot talk.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes,
that's fine. And I'm just joking. I am just joking because I see your movie poster behind you. Because if you mention a word, the Shogun assassins will come after you. Correct?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's going to be like The Ring, where that Shogun assassin is going to come out of the movie poster.
Oh, right out.
Yeah.
Back into the poster with yeah. That would actually, if you do record that, please put that recording on somewhere on the internet so people can see it. That'd be amazing. Yes. Yeah, but no. So we will. The short answer is more to come.
Yeah, that's fine. But
more to come.
I'm sorry, I couldn't miss that opportunity of just making fun of that.
Oh
part.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. Yeah, no, absolutely perfect.
Off the cuff question. I know I'm trying to wrap this up, but off the cuff question. So, Is that one of your favorite movies? The Shogun Assassin?
Shogun Assassin. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible, and and also I just love. I have the vinyl for it, and so that's where the poster came with the vinyl, and I just love that poster. It's a full color poster. It's really lovely, and it's it's a great film. I mean, it's ridiculous in its own ways, but I love those movies. I love those films so much that are just over the top. So. Yeah, it's brilliant.
All right. So, sorry, I'm going to start wrapping things up. When I looked on your website, in your biography, it stressed that you are a coffee addict.
Yes.
Where was the best coffee that you ever had?
Best coffee that I ever had. That is a very good question. Okay, I'm going to say. When I was in Tokyo, I went to this place called the Edinburgh Cafe, and I think it's in Shinjuku. And I had their, what was it called? It was their premium blend coffee. And I was like, I'm just going to go all out. It was like $8. I'm like, yeah, premium blend coffee. And they brought this percolator out to the table, and they did this whole entire kind of, they made this whole, kind of machination of it. And I was watching. It was very beautifully done, and that's the best coffee that I can remember having in a long time. So I was so delighted by how smooth and yet flavorful it was. I was like, could totally come by here and get another premium blend coffee. And and spend another, I don't care how much it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was absolutely beautiful. So yeah, that was probably the most. It was at the Cafe Edinburgh in Tokyo and Shinjuku.
That's pretty cool. Okay. What is the most fun or exciting thing that you love working either in comics or just writing in general?
What do I like most about it?
Yeah, fun or exciting thing, but either writing in comics or just writing in general.
The most fun, that's a great question. The most fun and exciting thing about writing in comics, writing in general, I think for me, it's actually that moment where I finish a section of something. It doesn't have to be the end of the book, but it has to be like a section of something where I look back and I think, this worked.
Mm-hmm.
And to go back and to look at it and to read back over it and to see that it came together somewhat in the way that I hoped it would. And that's taken me a while to get to that point where I'm starting to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
Before I'd be like, it's not there, it's not quite there. But now it becomes a little bit easier. And when I have that feeling, like I've really figured out what I wanted to accomplish for something.
Mm-hmm.
Very good feeling, very exciting to me.
That's
so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so maybe just the idea of kind of wrapping something up.
Okay.
That's really nice.
That's nice. Thank you. Favorite convention moment? It can be either from an anime convention or Comic-Con. So whether you went as a fan or as a creator.
Yeah. I would say favorite convention moment was probably going to C2E2.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think, let me make sure that I have this right moment, because you know what? I'm not even gonna say that. My favorite conventions in general are zine conventions. I love zine fests. So it's like zine fest, zines. So like homemade comics.
Oh, okay.
Like kind of like mini comics and stuff like that. They're kind of like small press comics. And so there's this one in the Bay Area called Zine Fest.
Oh, okay.
That I go to during when there was not pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
You go down and there you just see everybody kind of like putting together things that you would never be able to get anywhere else. And so for me, it was going to one of those festivals for the first time, or when it used to be in the Bay Area, we had APE, which is the Alternative Press Expo when it used to be in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to see all these people who are just genuinely like working to create something that is their own thing they're putting forward.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to find it. It's a lot of you won't be able to find it at a publisher. You won't be able to find it at a bookshelf.
Yes.
And that to me was just the coolest experience, to be able to find things that people just made because they really felt passionate about them.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to come home with this this art that you get to go, just look at and read and just think about how creative people can be.
Oh, that's pretty cool. All right. Have you and your family been to Hawaii?
I have been to Hawaii technically as a toddler,
No.
I went to Hawaii. My wife has gone to Hawaii and loves it there. And I'm not sure if we can put this on the show or we should, but this is just precursoring this. But my wife, she's Filipino American, and when she went to Hawaii, she was like, oh, is this what it feels like to be white? So she was like, because she was like, she loved it. She loved it. Yeah, she was making a joke. I don't think we can put that on the podcast. I was just going to tell you that, but my wife has been to Hawaii. She loves Hawaii.
Okay.
Yeah, and she was because she was like, she's making a joke about how like in where she grew up, like there's so many, like she feels like kind of like a minority.
Yeah.
And when she was able to go to Hawaii for the first time, she's like, oh, I feel like I'm just everybody here is like me, which is awesome.
I belong.
So, she loved it. And so she we definitely talked about going back many times.
Okay.
And I would love to go visit Hawaii. I would love to. And she's even said like I could live there. So she loves it. But I would like to go and visit and see for myself with as a non-infant.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, do you have any closing words to our listeners?
Just thank you so much for having me on this show and for this conversation. And for anybody who's listening, just, I would just ask, like, if you could just take a look at Unico Awakening. Please come and take a look at our campaign, watch the video, and if you're feeling so inclined, please support our campaign and see and get your hands on some of the really cool exclusive stuff that you probably won't be able to get elsewhere. And join us in supporting this wonderful project. And thank you so much for listening and reach out if you have any questions. I'm write to me on my website, find me on Twitter, say hello. I'm around.
Samuel, I wish you continued success with the Unico Awakening Kickstarter campaign. And mahalo. Thank you in Hawaiian. Thank you for your time, for giving me the opportunity to interview. Thank you very much for your time. I know I told you about an hour. I know we're going 90 minutes now, but thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. This has been really wonderful.
Oh, thank you. And I also want to thank Hannah of Superfan Promotion again. Hannah, again, thank you very much for setting up this interview. Thank you, Hannah. Now, if you are a new comic book reader or a lifelong comic book reader, please check out Unico Awakening Kickstarter that is going on right now. And if you know any of your family or friends who love manga, please let them know about this campaign. Again, the campaign is currently running right now, and it's going to end on June 2nd. And Samuel, again, correct me if I'm wrong. June 2nd is when
that is when it ends. Yes, correct. You're correct. Right. Yes.
Thank you. And then I want to thank Drew, the co-host of Comics for Fun and Profit. Drew, thank you very much for putting this episode together. Thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys. Aloha.
Our LCS is Cowabunga Comics out of Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, and their mail order company, Deep Discount Comics. And we went there, and we were actually invoice number 00001. We were the very first their very first customer, which was kind of cool. They've been nothing short of fantastic, customer service wise. Discounts, they were very close, if not the same or better than DCBS on a lot of things. Over and above, customer service wise, always taking care of us, going the extra mile, so responsive, getting instantaneous responses back to questions about things, to the point where knowing the stuff you like and anticipating your needs and having it suggested that you might want to add this to your order already before you even have to think about it. That's kind of cool. Really quality experience. So we love working with Cowabunga and Deep Discount, and that's why they're in our show notes every single episode, and have been for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes. That we leave them there because we like them. They're cool, good people. That's why they're in there. By God, they'd tell you to, if you've got a local comic book shop that you love, stay with them, because everybody needs to support their local comic shops. But if you're looking, check them out. You can check them out in the show notes. There's plenty of ways to get a hold of them. Either get on their list, just so you can check and see what kind of FOC and pre-order stuff they have and the discounts, and they'll send it to you each month, get you on that email list. And you can check out their shop, because they have a great shop of exclusive Cowabunga variants. Amazing stuff. Yes, they've always been there for us, and we take them for granted. So there you go. Now you know.